Hey guys, tonight we time travel to Renaissance Florence, a city where the streets are paved in ambition, the churches drip with gold, and someone's definitely dumping a chamber pot out a window as we speak. You're arriving at a pivotal moment. Lorenzo de' Medici, yes, the Lorenzo, Florence's golden prince, poetry patron, and political puppeteer, has just taken his final breath. And you, my friend, are about to find out why you wouldn't last a day in his world. It's early morning. The sky glows faintly pink over the terracotta rooftops, and the bells of Santa Maria del Fiore toll slowly, ominously. The city doesn't yet know what it's waking up to, but you will. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Whether it's a rainy afternoon in Tokyo or a sleepless night in New Jersey, I'd love to hear it. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink into consciousness in a narrow alley, back pressed to rough stone, the scent of tallow, smoke, and something that may or may not be cheese, wafting through the damp air. Your tunic clings to your skin. It's wool, always wool, and it's scratchy in the exact spot you want to scratch, but probably shouldn't in public. Florence breathes like a beast, waking from restless dreams. Church bells clash with rooster crows and the slap of sandals on stone. It's not quiet. It's never quiet. The city's heartbeat is a drum made of gossip and shoe leather. People begin to stir. A maid opens her window and throws out yesterday's wash water, no warning. You dodge instinctively and watch the splash darken the cobblestones. It misses you by a hair's breadth. Welcome to your first Florence miracle. A group of children race by with sticks and an alarming amount of shouting. One kicks a chicken. The chicken loses. You spot a cart swerving to avoid them, its driver shouting something that sounds like a curse and a grocery list mashed together. You follow the flow toward the Piazza della Signoria, Florence's public living room. You pass stone palazzos, each one trying to out-intimidate the next with carved lions, tall iron gates, and balconies that feel like judgmental eyebrows. News of Lorenzo's death hasn't reached most ears yet, but those who know, really know, are already watching each other too closely. The Medici were the glue holding Florence together with money, poetry, and semi-legal favors. Without them, the city could tear like cheap parchment. You press forward and find yourself in the square, where people are already arguing about bread prices and politics in the same breath. One man says the French will march in before month's end. Another accuses him of heresy. A woman mutters about omens and spills salt on purpose, then throws some over her shoulder, straight into your face. It stings, but you say nothing. You edge closer to the Palazzo Vecchio, the old stone fortress where Florence pretends to be a republic. Inside, the Signoria, the city's council, is already bickering over who's in charge. Or more accurately, who's in charge now that no one's officially in charge. Historians still argue whether Lorenzo's death marked the true decline of Florence's golden era, or if the seeds of chaos were sown long before, hiding behind frescoes and borrowed gold. You duck into a shady corner beside a statue of a saint you don't recognize, and watch as a friar clutches his rosary like a dagger, whispering prayers with a grimace that could curdle milk. He's one of Savonarola's people, no doubt. They smell sin in every silk sleeve, every painted ceiling. And now that Lorenzo's gone, Their whispers are growing louder. You take a deep breath and immediately regret it. Someone is burning hair. Someone else is cooking garlic. Both smells are definitely coming from the same window. You turn your gaze toward the massive dome of Brunelleschi's cathedral, rising above it all like a holy jawbone. It took 16 years to build and was considered impossible. You try to appreciate its beauty, but a nearby sewer vent reminds you Florence is always a city of contradictions. A boy tugs at your sleeve. "Want a relic?" he asks. He opens his hand to reveal what looks suspiciously like a rat's tail and a chicken bone. "St. Lucia's elbow," he says with a wink. You politely decline. He shrugs and skips away, hawking it to the next passing pilgrim. The air thickens, not just with smell, but tension. Florence doesn't just run on art and banking. It runs on rumor. And already, whispers float from doorways and behind veils. Piero's not ready. The French will come. The Pope won't back him. We'll be ruled by friars in a month. You remember that name? Piero de' Medici, Lorenzo's son, nicknamed the Unfortunate. You haven't met him, but the nickname doesn't inspire confidence. Leadership in Florence isn't passed. It's seized, worn like a mantle of fire, then shed just before it burns you alive. A sudden gust of wind lifts the smell of roasting chestnuts into the square, followed by something less delicious, possibly a tannery. You close your eyes for a moment and try to pretend this is a dream. But Florence won't let you rest. A woman shouts at a man for brushing past her too closely. He apologizes, then loudly thanks her for not stabbing him. The child near the fountain is washing a cat. The cat is screaming. You feel very seen. You move toward the river. The Arno flows past like liquid bronze, reflecting the sunset in a way that feels too beautiful for the chaos around you. For a moment, just one, the city holds still. You realize this moment won't last, because tomorrow, the balance shifts. The Medici grip slips. The friars rise. The artists panic. And you'll still be here, scratching under your collar, ducking flying relics, and wondering if pigeons in Florence are smarter than people. You wake up already walking. Your feet are sore. Your tunic is still damp in all the wrong places, and you haven't had anything resembling coffee in about 5 centuries. Welcome to Florentine street life, where you're always moving, mostly dodging, and rarely sure whether the puddle you just stepped in is water or something more. Ambitious. The cobblestones beneath you are worn smooth by generations of sandals, hooves, and very questionable wagon wheels. They're beautiful, in that break your ankle with a smile sort of way. You glance down an alley, and it's like walking into a Caravaggio painting, except instead of brooding saints, you find a butcher arguing with a fishmonger about the price of spoiled eel. The city feels alive, yes, but also feral. It's like Florence has a pulse, and you can hear it in the squawk of chickens, the clatter of hooves, the splash of something wet and unwanted hitting stone. You dodge left as a woman tosses out the contents of a chamber pot with all the enthusiasm of a street performer. No warning. No mind your head. Just whoosh and hope. You're learning fast. Don't walk too close to windows. Don't trust ledges. And definitely don't look up with your mouth open. The smell of Florence is something you will never forget. It hits you like a poorly aimed fresco. Part incense, part animal sweat, part someone left cheese out during a plague. Every street corner has its own olfactory identity. One smells like rosemary and old books. The next smells like despair and fermented garlic. You turn onto a wider road and instantly regret it. Carts loaded with hay, bricks, or unidentifiable meat jostle past. The drivers shout. The wheels creak. You press yourself against a wall that hasn't been cleaned since the fall of Rome. Someone's donkey sneezes in your direction. The donkey apologizes less than most people. A nearby water carrier sloshes by, balancing two enormous wooden buckets with a shoulder yoke. He's barefoot, filthy, and inexplicably cheerful. "Nice weather for fleas," he calls out, winking. You don't know whether to laugh or cry. You try to cross the street. This is a mistake. A carriage nearly clips your hip, and a child throws a fig at your head. Not out of malice, just practice. You survive. Barely. You spot a man leaning from a second-story window, reciting poetry to a bored cat. He gestures dramatically, and you realize this is the fifth window poet you've seen today. Florence is crawling with them. Most aren't paid. Some are brilliant. All are probably hungry. Historians still argue whether Florence's tightly packed urban layout helped foster genius, or just forced everyone to listen to each other complain until they wrote it down. You make your way toward the Ponte Vecchio, the bridge that spans the Arno River like a merchant's dream. It's lined with shops, goldsmiths, jewelers, and the occasional extremely shady apothecary. You stop to admire a necklace in one window. The man inside eyes your clothes and says, "For your wife," with a smirk. You say nothing. He slides the shutters closed. A woman selling roasted chestnuts waves you over. You consider buying one. Then you realize you have no money. Then she realizes you have no money. She throws a chestnut at your foot and shouts something about looking poor on purpose. You walk faster. You cut down a narrow side street that smells strongly of tanneries, which is to say, it smells like wet leather, hot vinegar, and existential dread. Tanners work shirtless, dunking hides into vats of God knows what. The hides steam. So do the tanners. One glances up and says, "You're not from here." You smile awkwardly. He spits into the vat. You press on. Florence's layout isn't exactly designed for comfort. The streets twist and turn like someone dropped a bowl of noodles and then built houses wherever they landed. You try to orient yourself by church towers, but every neighborhood has its own, and they all look smugly identical. You pass a square where musicians are playing lutes. Badly. One string snaps mid-ballad, and the performer swears in a way that makes a nun walking by drop her rosary. The audience applauds anyway. A boy offers to shine your shoes. You look down at your mud-soaked turn shoes, which are about as shineable as a wet sponge. He charges you anyway. You pay him with a nod of gratitude and a half-eaten fig you didn't know you were still carrying. You reach the city center again, just in time for the midday rush. And yes, Florence has rush hour. Artisans spill out of workshops. Clerks rush between offices. A goat gets loose and sprints down the street. 3 people cheer. One tries to catch it. He fails. Overhead, laundry lines stretch between buildings like banners. You narrowly avoid a falling sock. It's huge. It's heavy. You suspect it was used to store potatoes, possibly weapons. You duck into a quieter alley for a moment of peace. But even here, the walls whisper. Every inch is etched with graffiti. Little sketches, initials, political symbols. Some warn of thieves. Others praise obscure poets. One simply says, "Luca stinks." You believe it. You rest on a stone ledge and watch the world swirl around you. It's beautiful, maddening, vibrant, gross. Florence isn't a postcard. It's a pressure cooker with marble columns. It demands you pay attention, or pay the price. And as a nearby fruit cart tips over and starts a slow-motion orange avalanche toward your feet, you realize something. You've officially survived your first real day walking these streets. Barely. You wake to a familiar sensation, itching. It starts at your shoulder, then spreads. A tingling, persistent crawl beneath your tunic, as though a tiny Renaissance-themed flea circus has set up shop on your skin. You scratch with dignity for roughly 3 seconds before abandoning dignity entirely. Congratulations. You're now a true Florentine, because what you're wearing isn't just a wool tunic, it's a status symbol wrapped around a biological experiment. Your outfit, like everyone else's, was chosen not for comfort or hygiene, but to announce precisely who you are in this society and who you're not. Spoiler, you're not nobility. You glance at the garb of people around you. A merchant's wife glides past in deep crimson velvet, her sleeves slashed to reveal gold-stitched silk. Her hair is coiled into perfection, pinned with what looks like pearls, but may very well be extremely clean beans. She walks like the ground should thank her for being stepped on. You, meanwhile, are wearing roughly dyed wool. Brown. Wrinkled. Smells like it's seen at least one goat funeral. A local boy whistles as he passes you and mutters, "Peasant chic." You think it's a compliment. It's not. You make your way toward a tailor's stall, tucked into a corner near the piazza. It's tiny, but bursting with fabric, trims, and judgments. The tailor, an older man with silver hair and eyes like scissors, inspects you without moving from his stool. "That tunic," he says, as if naming a disease. You offer a half smile. He sighs. Florence runs on thread, but not everyone should wear it. He then pulls out a bolt of cloth, dyed a violent shade of blue. "Lapis lazuli," he murmurs. "Costs more than your future." He lets you touch it. It feels like water and power and silk dreams. You imagine walking through Florence wearing this. People would nod. Doors would open. Children might throw rose petals at your feet. Then he yanks it away. "You can't afford it," he says, not unkindly. "But I'll show you something cheaper. Still itchy, but respectable." You nod, because in Florence, appearances are everything, and not just to impress neighbors. There are actual laws, sumptuary laws, that dictate who can wear what. Rich merchant, velvet and fur, guild apprentice, earth tones, and maybe a stripe. Foreign time traveler, you're not even on the chart. Historians still argue whether these fashion rules were about preserving morality or just making sure the rich never had to share their tailor. You walk outside, scratching again, and pass 2 noblewomen arguing over whose cousin is wearing illegal silk. "She says it's Turkish wool," one hisses. "It shines, Lucia." You keep walking. At a nearby shop, a perfumer sells oils and powders to mask the, natural aromas of Renaissance fashion. You try a dab of something floral. A dog sneezes behind you. You pretend not to notice. A young tailor's apprentice offers to measure you for a doublet. You agree, until he starts wrapping a cord around your chest like he's restringing a lute. "Hold your breath," he says. "Tighter makes you look richer." You nearly pass out trying to look middle class. You spot a group of boys in matching green tunics, apprentices from the Weavers' Guild. Their sleeves are rolled, their hands dyed indigo, their jokes mostly about who has the worst flea bites. You're tempted to join them until you hear one say, "I found a tick in my sock." Named it Giovanni. The others laugh. You walk faster. Further up the hill, you find a laundress spreading wet garments on a rooftop line. You ask if she knows how to clean a tunic that's developed a sentient smell. She squints at your garment, sniffs, and says, "Burn it." You thank her. Later, you stumble into a fabric dyer's courtyard, and it's a whole new world of color and chaos. Massive vats of boiling dye bubble like cauldrons. Workers stir with wooden paddles longer than your leg. You spot a man dunking entire tunics into a blood-red bath. The smell is part vinegar, part regret. One dyer waves you over. Want to try? You do not, but you nod. He hands you gloves, already stained a rainbow of past mistakes. You dip a tunic into the blue vat, and it transforms before your eyes. From dull linen to vibrant sea storm blue, it's beautiful and immediately ruined when the wind blows dye into your eye. They laugh. You cry. Someone hands you a turnip to cool your face. It doesn't work. But it's not all suffering. You pass a group of women near the fountain, spinning flax into linen thread. Their hands move fast. Their eyes, faster. They whisper as they work, commenting on who's wearing what, who's married who, and who's obviously using forbidden Spanish lace. One woman eyes your now tie-dyed tunic and smiles. At least you're not invisible. You smile back. You'll take the win. By nightfall, Florence cools, and people emerge in finer robes for evening strolls. The fashion changes with the hour. Richer colors, finer weaves, collars that scream, "Look at my wealth," but not too closely. You find yourself beside a bonfire where workers are burning fabric scraps, broken combs, and a wig that might have been alive. The flames reflect on a passing noble's gold-threaded cloak. He doesn't flinch. He knows the rules. Spend. Shine. Survive. You curl up on a stone step beneath an archway, itchy but warmer than before. And as you drift off, you hear a tailor's voice in your head. Florence doesn't care how you feel. It cares how you look. You scratch once more and sigh. Welcome to fashion. You wake up hungry. Not the kind of hungry where you forgot to eat lunch. The kind of hungry where even the chipped corner of your belt starts to look snackable. Your stomach growls so loudly that a passing rooster gives you a dirty look. Welcome to breakfast in Renaissance Florence, which, unfortunately, is more of a theory than a practice. The concept of breakfast as a proper meal hasn't quite caught on yet. Most people skip it, or nibble on something light if they're lucky. If you're rich, maybe you've got fruit, cheese, or some sweetened bread. If you're you, you're about to make eye contact with a rock-hard crust and pretend it's a croissant. You follow your nose, or more accurately, the vague scent of not despair, toward the nearest street vendor. He's ladling something into wooden bowls and shouting, "Morning meal for those who don't faint easily." You inch closer. It's hot. It's gray. It's probably porridge. He hands you a steaming bowl of barley gruel and a chunk of stale rye bread. "Wine's extra," he adds. You squint at the wine jug, which has the same cloudy color as a thunderstorm. You decide you're not that hungry. You take your gruel and sit on the edge of a fountain that has definitely seen better centuries. The first spoonful tastes like warm sadness, thickened with onions. The bread, meanwhile, is harder than your current life choices. A woman beside you dunks her bread in the wine. "Softens it," she says. You try it. It does not help. Historians still argue whether Florentine lower classes actually preferred simple food or simply had no choice. But one thing is clear. Breakfast was never about joy. It was about not passing out before mid-morning prayers. Nearby, a fishmonger unwraps his morning delivery. The smell hits the piazza like a crime. You try not to gag as he waves a knife and yells, "Fresh," even though nothing fresh should make that sound. You pass a baker, pulling flat rounds of bread from a stone oven. The scent of yeast, smoke, and salt is the closest thing to hope you felt all day. You move in. The baker eyes you. Got coin? You don't. He sighs and tears off a corner. Apprentices get hungry too. You're not an apprentice, but you nod gratefully and chew. It's delicious. Crispy edges, warm center, a sprinkle of rosemary that tastes almost like magic. You consider proposing to the bread. From a nearby shop, a woman calls out, selling goat cheese. You linger too long. She notices. You look like someone who needs calcium, she says, handing you a sample. It smells slightly aggressive, but the flavor is sharp and creamy. You nearly weep. She charges you half a fig for the wedge. You give her a button. She shrugs. It's a barter economy, if you're charming enough. You take your cheese and bread and wander into the market, your spirits slightly restored. But Florence isn't done humbling you. You turn a corner and find a butcher's stall. A small boy is chasing a piglet. The piglet is winning. The butcher is not amused. You sidestep a bucket of something that looks like it used to be inside something else. The butcher smiles with all four of his teeth. Breakfast sausage? You run. Further on, you spot a monk sipping warm beer from a wooden cup. He offers you a taste. You accept. It's thick, sour, and tastes like someone whispered wheat at a puddle. He beams. Healthier than water. He's not wrong. The water here? Dubious at best. A gamble at worst. You pass a woman at a street corner with a basket of dried figs and nuts. She offers you one in exchange for a prayer. You mumble something that might have been Latin. She hands you a fig anyway. Sweet, earthy, brief. A whisper of sugar that disappears before your brain can fully celebrate it. And then comes the mid-morning meal, the one real bite many Florentines get before dinner. You find workers sitting on steps, eating onions with crusty bread, maybe a wedge of hard cheese. Someone passes a skin of wine. Another bites into an apple with suspicious confidence. A mason offers you a bite of his garlic-stuffed flatbread. You accept, and for the rest of the day, your breath could kill a heretic at 20 paces. Worth it. You spot a wealthier woman seated on a balcony above, sipping something from a silver goblet. Likely spiced wine, sweetened with honey and cinnamon. She's surrounded by fruit, dates, pomegranates, maybe even an orange. Imported, exotic. You imagine stealing one. You also imagine the consequences. You move on. At a corner, you meet a spice seller. He shows you saffron, pepper, and nutmeg with reverence, like they're holy relics. One whiff of the saffron, and you suddenly understand why people went to war over this stuff. Breakfast, he says, only necessary if you lack imagination. You leave with nothing but the memory of cinnamon. By late morning, your belly is slightly less hollow. But food fatigue is real here. You've eaten a little, but nothing that sticks to your ribs. And it's clear that Florence doesn't feed you for pleasure. It feeds you so you can keep working, walking, and worrying about taxes. You sit on the edge of a well and watch a child try to sell boiled chestnuts from a cloth pouch. He trips. They spill. A dog eats 3. The boy shrugs and starts again. That's Florence. Persistent, messy, vaguely edible. You take the last bite of your bread and chase it with a final chew of cheese. You don't feel full, but you feel Florentine. And in this city, sometimes that's enough. You wake up surrounded by noise. Not just noise, labor, hammering, scraping, shouting. The kind of ambient din that tells you everyone's awake, working, and likely sweating through several layers of wool. You stretch, joints cracking like old wood, and glance around. Florence is already wide awake and getting to work, whether you're ready or not. Spoiler, you're not. But you've got to try something. Nobody gets to just be in Renaissance Florence. If you're not producing, crafting, hauling, or bleeding into a ledger, you're in the way. And while time travel might have skipped the resume stage, the city still expects you to earn your stale bread and goat cheese. You start with something simple, a wool workshop. The smell is immediate. Damp sheep, lye, and economic ambition. Inside, workers comb coarse fleece by hand, dragging thick-toothed brushes through dense knots. You join in. Your hands blister after 10 minutes. Your arms start to feel like warm breadsticks. You power through until the master weaver walks by, peers at your section, and mutters, "This looks like a goat died mid-combing." You're dismissed. Kindly, but definitely dismissed. So you move on. Across the square, a man chisels marble like it owes him money. You ask to help. He laughs, tosses you a chisel, and gestures to a rough block. Your first tap chips the corner. Your second makes the whole thing wobble. Your third earns you a "go back to brushing sheep." You back away with what's left of your dignity and some fine marble dust in your lungs. You try the tannery next. Maybe you'll do better with animal hides? You won't. You nearly vomit from the smell before you even step inside. It's a cocktail of boiling urine, rotting flesh, and leather dreams. Men stir giant vats with long paddles, and one shouts, "More brains in the mix!" You pray he means animal brains. They hand you a hide and tell you to scrape. You do. For 5 seconds. Then you hand it back with shaking arms and tear-stung eyes. You're sent outside. Again. Historians still argue whether Florence's booming trades lifted more people into prosperity or just ground them down faster. One thing's clear. Guild life isn't for the faint of heart or the weak of stomach. You try your luck at a baker's stall, asking if they need help kneading. The baker sizes you up. Can you punch dough? You nod. Can you punch it like it insulted your mother? You hesitate. He shrugs and hands you a sack of flour. Start with this. You spill it. Twice. You leave before he makes you clean it with your tunic. Nearby, a bookbinder is sewing pages into a leather spine. You watch, mesmerized. He lets you try threading a needle. You prick your thumb within seconds. He sighs and offers you a seat, then makes you sort loose parchment for the next 3 hours. It's the first thing you're moderately good at. As you stack, you read snatches of Latin, illustrations of saints, a recipe for eel pie, and a love letter that ends with, "Tell your husband I hope he chokes on the pears." Florence, as always, never disappoints. You help until your eyes ache and your fingers throb. The binder says, "You have a patient hand. Try the scriptorium next." You find the scriptorium tucked behind a small monastery, its interior flooded with pale morning light and ink-stained silence. Monks hunch over vellum, quills scratching rhythmically. You're handed a pen. Write the Lord's Prayer, in Latin, perfectly, or not at all. You freeze. You write something. The monk reads it, frowns, and says, "This is either a prayer or a menu." You're not invited back. You head toward the public fountain, a common gathering place for servants and laborers. You sit beside a man with cracked hands and a bandaged wrist. He eyes your tunic and asks, "What's your skill?" You pause. He nods slowly. You're still searching. He offers you a hunk of bread. You share the last of your fig. Later, you shadow a group of porters, men who haul everything from grain to gravel, up steep streets, in the heat, for hours. One hands you a crate of clay tiles. Just to the next block, he says. You nearly fall over. Your arms scream. Your back begs for mercy. You finally set it down and nearly collapse. The porter nods. You lasted longer than a bishop's son last week. Progress? As the sun dips, the streets fill with apprentices sweeping stoops, smiths finishing their last strikes, and washerwomen wringing out cloth near the river. You've tried half a dozen trades and been rejected by most, but you learned something too. Florence doesn't care who you were. It cares what you can do, right now, with your hands, your head, or your back. You pass a young artist sketching a column shadow. He looks tired, hopeful, starving. You offer him your crust of bread. He offers you a smile. Want to learn how to shade? You sit beside him. And just like that, you found a quiet job, watching someone else almost succeed. It's not lucrative. It won't impress anyone. But in this city, it's enough to keep you here one more day. You wake up coughing. At first, you think it's just the dust, or the paint fumes, or the tanner's memory still lingering in your nose. But no, it's worse. You feel it in your chest, thick and stubborn, like Florence is trying to digest you. You sit up and rub your temples. Your skin's clammy. Your throat scratches like you slept in a haystack made of chalk. And as you stagger toward the fountain to splash some water on your face, a wave of dread settles in. You might be getting sick. You're not alone. Everywhere you turn, someone's coughing, sneezing, or hunched over, like their spine gave up around Wednesday. Florence, for all its beauty, is a city balanced delicately between genius and germs. You pass a boy on the street with puffy eyes and a runny nose. His mother wipes his face with a corner of her apron. It's just bad air, she says. He'll sweat it out. You nod politely. But in Florence, bad air, or miasma as they call it, is blamed for just about everything from coughs to corruption. The idea is that sickness comes from foul smells, rising from swamps, sewers, or sin. You try not to inhale too deeply. You make your way to the apothecary, a tiny shop sandwiched between a sausage vendor and a candle maker. It smells better than both. Rosemary, dried lavender, and something vaguely lemony. The apothecary eyes you as you enter. Fever? He asks before you say anything. You nod. He gestures toward a wall of jars. Thistle, sage, ground pearl, honey mixed with garlic, or we can leach it out. You eye the jar of leeches. They look thrilled. Maybe just the garlic, you say. He grunts and scoops a paste into a scrap of parchment. Rub this under your arms. Once at dawn. Once before bed. If you wake up dead, it didn't work. You appreciate the honesty. Historians still argue whether apothecaries did more good than harm in Renaissance cities. Some recipes were genuinely helpful. Others were more like edible guesses. Either way, they were better than the alternative, the plague doctor. You spot one near the city gates, dressed in black robes, gloves, and the iconic beaked mask, stuffed with aromatic herbs to filter the air. The sight is terrifying, like a crow on its way to a very formal funeral. Children avoid him. Adults cross themselves. You learn he's treating a household that's been quarantined, their door marked with a red X. No one goes in, no one comes out. Bread is left on the steps. Prayers are whispered from across the street. You step back, suddenly hyper-aware of every ache in your body. A monk nearby offers you a sprig of wormwood. To hang around your neck, he says, keeps death confused. You take it. Further up the road, A man collapses mid-step. A crowd gathers, murmuring. Some back away. Others lean in. The man moans. Someone says he was at the river yesterday. Someone else says he insulted a relic. A city guard arrives and calls for a stretcher. To Santa Maria Nuova, he says. Quickly. You follow the crowd to the hospital, a large stone building that smells like vinegar and boiled herbs. Inside, rows of straw beds, some occupied, some not anymore. Nuns move between them with practiced grace, murmuring prayers, applying salves, emptying basins. You're told to wait. While you do, a nurse hands you a cup of something bitter. Drink, for strength. You sip. It tastes like sadness and basil. Across the room, you overhear a doctor explaining humor theory, the belief that the body is governed by 4 fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. If you're sick, it means they're out of balance. The solution? Bleed you, purge you, or give you something disgusting to chew on. You decide to keep pretending the garlic paste is enough. You exit the hospital before they can decide you're too pale to leave. In the street, a woman offers you a cure made from boiled owl feathers. You decline. She curses you with a smile. You pass a small chapel where people light candles for the sick. One girl whispers a prayer for her brother, who hasn't spoken in 3 days. A friar says illness is the price of Florence's vanity. The city must burn its sins before it can heal. You buy a roasted onion from a vendor, not because you're hungry, because someone said it's good for fevers. You eat half and immediately regret it. It's crunchy. Back at the apothecary, you ask if there's anything stronger. He hands you a bottle of wine with rosemary sprigs floating inside. Drink, then sleep somewhere with a breeze. You take it and stagger toward the riverbank. There, you lie on a patch of grass under a canopy of fig trees. The wind is soft. The sky is pink. Your eyes close. And for a moment, Florence is kind. But you know it won't last. Tomorrow, you might wake up better. Or worse. Or not at all. Because in Renaissance Florence, sickness isn't just a risk. It's part of life. An invisible guest at every table. A whisper in every prayer. A shadow behind every brushstroke of beauty. You curl into your cloak and breathe shallowly. Maybe the wormwood works after all. You wake to silence. Not peace. Not calm. Silence. The kind that makes your skin prickle. That makes Florence feel wrong. Because silence in the city doesn't mean rest. It means someone important is watching. You blink against the morning light and realize the usual chorus. Donkeys braying, carts rumbling, merchants arguing over fig prices is absent. People are tiptoeing through the streets. Doors are only half open. Voices are hushed. And then you see them. A group of Medici guards, dressed in crimson and steel, standing at the end of the piazza like blood-stained chess pieces. They're not moving, just watching. You sit up straighter, try to look harmless. It doesn't help. A woman nearby mutters, "The Medici are testing the waters." You ask why. She shrugs. Lorenzo's dead. The city's nervous, so they show the teeth. The Medici, bankers, rulers, patrons, puppeteers, not officially kings, but powerful enough that calling them citizens feels like a joke. Their gold funds, churches, art, schools, and wars. Their whispers appoint popes. Their enemies vanish. And now, with Lorenzo gone, everything is delicate. You walk past the Palazzo Medici, a fortress disguised as a house. Stone walls so thick they could stop cannon fire. Small, slit-like windows. No softness. Just wealth, authority, and the subtle message. We built this. We're watching. Inside, Piero de' Medici, Lorenzo's son, is pacing halls, sweating under velvet, trying to hold together a legacy heavier than Brunelleschi's dome. Florence knows he's not his father. And Florence, like a hungry dog, can smell weakness. Historians still argue whether Piero's failure was inevitable, or if Florence simply refused to be led by someone with fewer enemies and more silken cushions. You continue down the Via de Calzaiuoli, the main artery between wealth and worship. You pass a Medici bank branch, its columns flanked by guards, and its doors open just wide enough for the elite. Inside, money changes hands quietly. Florins, ducats, favors, threats. A clerk with ink-stained fingers glances up and nods to someone behind you. You don't turn around. You duck into a shaded alley to catch your breath. A tailor leans out of his window and calls down, "Don't talk politics today." Not with that many red cloaks out. You nod. You weren't planning to. But Florence is never just art and frescoes. It's a stage, and every street is set for drama. The Medici fund the backdrop, churches, squares, fountains, but they also decide which actors get to keep their roles. You find yourself near the Loggia dei Lanzi, an open-air gallery of statues frozen mid-myth. Hercules, Perseus, men locked in marble combat. You stare at the perfection of muscle and motion, and for a moment, it's easy to forget the power games swirling through the streets. But the spell breaks when a boy runs by, chased by a man in a city official's sash. "Pickpocket!" someone yells. The boy ducks into the crowd. Gone. Just like that. And you're reminded, justice here is a public spectacle, but power is private, quiet, sharp. Later, in a tavern tucked behind the Duomo, you sit with your back to the wall. People drink, laugh too loudly, and talk with too many glances over shoulders. A merchant complains about wool taxes. A stonemason grumbles about city hall bribes. And someone whispers, "Did you hear what happened to the poet who insulted the Medici crest in his satire?" No one finishes the sentence. You notice a man standing at the corner of the room, drinking nothing, listening to everything. Florence has eyes, ears, ledgers. You move on. You pass a fresco being touched up, an angel's wing, delicate and golden. The artist nods at you. "Commissioned by the Medici," he says, as if explaining why the paint is so fine. "Most churches wouldn't pay for lapis blue," he adds, "but the Medici like their saints in style." You nod. Lapis blue is mined from Afghanistan. It costs more than a wedding dowry. And the Medici use it for halos. Down the next street, you pass the Orson Michel, a church that's also a granary, because in Florence, everything does double duty. Faith and food, worship and commerce, and sometimes prayer and propaganda. A new statue is going up in one of the niches. You ask who paid for it. The mason grins. Guess. You don't have to. As dusk creeps in, the city lights candles, not just for light, but for appearances. Windows glow gold, shadows stretch, and Florence becomes a stage again. Wealth walks arm in arm with reputation. Even the beggars arrange themselves near frescoes. Better backdrop. You settle onto a stone bench and watch as a boy recites poetry to a girl on a balcony. It's awful. She applauds anyway. Behind him, a Medici banner flutters from a balcony, and you realize the whole city is holding its breath, waiting. Will Piero tighten his grip? Will the people push back? Will the Medici hold or fall? Florence doesn't know yet, but you do know one thing. Tonight, you won't be speaking too loudly. Not near guards, not near strangers, not near open windows. Because the Medici may be Florence's heart, but they've also got a noose for every neck, just in case. You wake to shouting, and not the usual market haggling or rooster-related drama. This is theatrical shouting, echoing off plaster walls like a soliloquy in a very angry play. You sit up just in time to see a man storm out of a workshop, flinging a paintbrush like it personally betrayed him. His cloak is covered in smudges, his sandals mismatched, and his hair radiates the kind of chaos that can only belong to an artist on a deadline. Welcome to the Florentine art world, where masterpieces are born out of inspiration, ego, unpaid invoices, and occasional public screaming. The man stomps away, muttering about ungrateful patrons and miserable light angles. A boy runs after him, carrying a rolled-up sketch and a basket of bread. You hear the words, "The chapel ceiling won't paint itself," as they disappear around a corner. You wander in the direction they came from and find the source, a small atelier or artist studio where the scent of linseed oil, wet plaster, and sheer panic fills the air. Inside, young men grind pigments, soak brushes, and stretch canvas with the speed of people who know they're not getting dinner unless they finish this Madonna before Vespers. One of them nods at you and points to a stool. You draw? You don't. He shrugs. You fetch, then. You spend the next hour running between shelves, finding rabbit glue, crushed malachite, and a container labeled "Matter, do not inhale." You pretend to understand what any of this means. The artist returns, red-faced, half-mad, and humming. His assistants scatter. He paints a furious stroke across a fresco and whispers, "Now that's a virgin." Historians still argue whether the Renaissance artists were respected geniuses or just glorified contractors with excellent press. You're starting to think both. The man introduces himself only as Sandro. You recognize the name, Botticelli, as in The Birth of Venus, which may or may not be half finished in the back room under a pile of figs and unpaid receipts. You point. He sighs. Don't look at her. She's sulking. He doesn't mean the model. He means the painting. You're quickly learning that Renaissance artists are fragile creatures. They crave praise, fear deadlines, and speak about their work like it might run away if insulted. Across the street, another atelier opens its doors. The artist steps out, taller, leaner, and with a nose like he invented geometry. He eyes Botticelli's studio, mutters something about overrated drapery, and walks off. A nearby apprentice whispers, "That's Leonardo. He makes machines and enemies." You believe it. Leonardo's studio is nothing like Botticelli's. It's cleaner, colder, full of sketches pinned to walls like butterflies. There's a half-built flying machine, a dissected bird, and a model of a man with too many arms. You stare, overwhelmed. Leonardo glances up, barely noticing you. "You're not here for math," he says flatly. "Good." He hands you a jar of ink and a quill made from a goose that probably died of exhaustion. Trace this. He means a diagram of a bridge that folds itself. You don't understand any of it, but you trace carefully. Leonardo scribbles notes around you, muttering, drawing, tossing ideas like breadcrumbs across the page. "Imagine a world," he whispers, "where paint dries before the patron dies." You nod, as if you follow. His assistant returns with bad news. The Duke wants changes. Again. Leonardo doesn't flinch. He just sighs and says, "I'll tell him God painted it that way." You back out slowly. On the way out, you spot a mural in progress. Angels, saints, clouds. One angel looks suspiciously like the wine cellar down the street. You ask. The painter shrugs. "He paid me. Florentine art is both sacred and deeply transactional. Paint a holy scene, get paid in goats. Sculpt a saint, get a tax break. Sketch a portrait, that might earn you dinner, if the subject likes the nose. You pass a stone carver, chiseling away at a massive block. He mutters to himself, I can see him in there. Just got to set him free. You ask who? He stops, looks you dead in the eye. David. You nod. He adds, but I need a better block. This one's flawed. That's Michelangelo then. Of course. Later, you find a small group of artists drinking cheap wine and insulting each other in verse. One recites a sonnet about how another paints like a blind nun with 3 brushes in one hand. Everyone laughs, including the target. Competition here is brutal, but vital. Art in Florence is like air. You breathe it, fight over it, and occasionally choke on it. The conversation turns to patrons, those mysterious wallets and robes. Someone mutters about a cardinal who paid for an entire altarpiece and then decided he hated angels. Too smug, he said. Someone else tells the story of a painter exiled for making St. Peter look too much like the mayor's brother-in-law. He wasn't even wrong, they add. You sit in silence, soaking it in. Genius here doesn't equal stability. The patronage system is fickle. One day, you're sketching for the Pope. The next, you're selling candle holders carved from scrap wood. Artists pray not to God, but to bankers. Often, both. The moon rises. The city glows. You pass a fresco drying on a wall. The colors shimmer, even in the low light. A woman kneels, her face serene, her hands reaching. Above her, the sky swirls with pigment and promise. You stop, just long enough to wonder, will it last? Florence is building eternity one brushstroke at a time. But no one ever tells you how long that eternity really is. You wake up on cold stone, not in a bed, not even on straw, just a doorstep outside a small chapel, your cloak bunched under your head, and your legs numb from the knees down. The passing nun steps over you without blinking. It's okay. You've learned not to take it personally. You sit up, brush yesterday's fresco dust off your tunic, and inhale, flinching at the sharp scent of incense, city soot, and whatever that was in your armpit. The morning bells are ringing, echoing across Florence like iron chimes, calling both saints and sinners to attention. Today, you decide to lay low and blend in with the more pious half of Florence, which is harder than it sounds. You shuffle into the Santa Croce church with a handful of others, workers, widows, a nobleman trying very hard not to look bored. The nave is massive and shadowed. Candles flicker along the aisles, and the scent of beeswax fills the air like a quiet fog. The priest begins his Latin sermon, sonorous and slow, his voice bouncing off stone in rhythmic waves. You don't understand a word. Neither do most of the others, but everyone nods along. The key is not in knowing. It's in appearing to know. You kneel. You cross yourself. You try not to fall asleep during the credo. Afterward, a friar passes a wooden bowl for donations. You drop in a pebble and hope no one notices. Outside, the sunlight's stronger. You step into the square, only to find a group of townspeople gossiping beneath a statue of the Virgin. And not quietly. Did you hear about the banker's wife? One woman whispers. Confessed 3 times this week. That's too many times. Her friend fans herself dramatically. She's probably just trying to hide what she hasn't confessed. Florentines love church. They also love talking through church. Across the street, a man sells prayer beads and small relics. A toe bone of St. Agnes, a piece of Mary's veil, and something labeled authentic beard hair of St. Jerome that looks suspiciously like twine. You ask what guarantees the authenticity. He leans in. Faith. You nod and walk away. You pass a boy scrawling graffiti on the chapel wall. Confess harder, it says in thick charcoal. The boy runs. A priest emerges seconds later, sighs, and starts scrubbing it off with a wet cloth. You offer to help. He waves you off. They'll just write it again. You continue toward the baptistry, where a wedding is taking place. The doors are shut tight, but you can hear the chants, the rustle of silk, the impatient tap of an elderly noble's cane. Two merchants outside argue over whether the groom's dowry was fairly negotiated. It's not about money, one insists. The other scoffs. It's always about money. Florence runs on faith and finance, often in the same breath. Later, you find yourself beside a confraternity house, where a group of men in matching robes are preparing for a procession. They carry a heavy wooden cross and chant softly as they walk. Some are barefoot. One carries a candle as long as your arm. People kneel as the group passes. You kneel too, mostly because someone yells, "Kneel," behind you, and you panic. A man next to you whispers, "They say prayers help balance Florence's sins. But have you seen the taverns lately?" You nod. The streets begin to fill with friars shouting scripture. Some call for repentance. Some demand silence. One holds up a cloth he claims has the face of Christ imprinted in it. You can't tell. It mostly looks like a sweaty pillowcase. You step into a smaller chapel, tucked behind a stone wall. Inside, it's cool and dim. A woman lights a candle for her brother. You do the same, unsure who it's for. Maybe yourself. Maybe Florence. Above the altar, a fresco shows Christ looking out. Not with anger, but weariness. Like he's heard all the confessions before and already knows who's faking it. You sit in the back pew, quiet, still, until you hear it, the soft clink of coins. You glance to your right and see a noble slipping a pouch into the priest's sleeve. It's not a secret. It's just Florentine business as usual. Historians still argue whether the church in Florence was more holy or political. Most agree it was both. Divine scripture in the front, coin counting in the vestry. You leave the chapel and pass a street preacher railing against vanity. "Burn your mirrors," he cries. "Shatter your jewels." A crowd watches, amused. One woman checks her reflection in a spoon. The preacher is a follower of Savonarola, a Dominican friar rising in power. His message is fire and fury. Florence must cleanse itself of sin, of pride, of pleasure. You'll hear more of him soon. Too much more. At twilight, you follow the crowd to Vespers, the evening service. Bells ring. Candles glow. Psalms echo down narrow alleys. And even those who spent the day cheating, lying, or overcharging for figs are now kneeling in reverence. Florence is not a city of atheists. It's a city of pragmatists with very creative moral math. As you kneel in the courtyard, head bowed, you think, in this city, confession is a ritual. Forgiveness is negotiable. And God? He's probably leaning out of a window somewhere, muttering, "Again with the garlic breath?" You smile, just a little. You wake to the sound of sloshing water and realize it's coming from your own clothes. You're soaked. You sit up, disoriented, and piece it together. Sometime in the night, it rained. Not much. Just enough to turn your sleeping spot beside the fountain into a Florentine sponge. Your tunic now weighs twice as much and smells like regret boiled in broth. You stand, stretch, and try to shake off the moisture. It doesn't work. But even if it did, there's a bigger problem. You still aren't clean. Florence is many things. Beautiful, brilliant, bold, But it is not a city known for its commitment to personal hygiene. In fact, bathing has become suspicious. You wander through the narrow streets, sniffing the morning air. Mistake. The smells have fermented overnight. One alley offers tallow smoke, rotting turnips, and wet parchment. Another greets you with tanning fluid, garlic, and a sharp note of civic failure. You duck into a courtyard where laundry hangs on lines like faded prayer flags. A woman beats a tunic against a stone slab. Repeatedly, violently. Dirt runs deep, she mutters. You try to remember the last time you bathed. You fail. You consider asking her if there's a place to wash. She answers before you speak. No tubs. You'll catch fever. She eyes your tunic. Best to perfume it or burn it. You wander off, deeply humbled. Historians still debate whether Renaissance Europeans actually feared water or just feared the places that provided it. Public bathhouses, once popular, have now been shuttered, condemned as sinful dens of disease and nudity. Florence has embraced a new motto: clean soul, questionable armpits. You pass a perfumery near the market. Inside, a man with delicate hands and a nose like a hawk wafts a vial toward a noblewoman. This one is bergamot, musk, and hope, he says. She sniffs, nods, pays with gold. You ask if he has anything for fleas. He offers you a satchel of dried lavender and rue. Wear it near your heart, he says. It might save you. You pay with a button. As you pin the herbs inside your tunic, a boy beside you grins. You smell like a priest's laundry. He means it as a compliment. You continue your walk. You pass a barber surgeon, his red and white striped pole spinning in the breeze. Inside, a man is getting a tooth pulled with something that looks like medieval tongs. You hear the scream before you see the blood. The barber catches your eye. Need a trim? A bleed? A shave? A leech? You shake your head and speed walk away. He yells, "Don't let the humors pile up." Good advice, maybe. Further down, near the Arno, you spot a young monk carrying 2 wooden buckets. You follow him through a gate and into a small cloistered garden. There's a stone basin fed by a thin stream of water. Simple, cold, hidden. You glance around. No one stops you. You remove your tunic, step up to the basin, and splash. The water hits like glass. You gasp, scrub your arms, your face, your neck. You pour a bucket over your head and feel weeks of soot, dust, and existential dread wash down your back. A passing friar raises an eyebrow. You nod at him, dripping. Necessary? He nods back. Twice a month is permitted. Once a week is suspicious. You dry off in the sun, newly reborn and moderately shivering. You walk on with a spring in your step and a squelch in your shoes. But by midday, Florence has undone your efforts. You pass a butcher's alley, where blood slicks the stones. A pig squeals. A man yells. You step over something that might be a hoof. You duck into a side street to avoid the worst of it and find yourself at a laundry station beside the river. Women are scrubbing garments with homemade soap made from ashes and animal fat. They wear rolled sleeves and expressions like stone. One looks up. You need washing. You nod. She throws you a brush. Start with your shoes. You scrub. She watches. Good effort. Poor technique. You thank her. You watch as she dips a tunic in a solution of lye and herbs. This one belonged to a baker, she says. He's dead now, but the stain lives on. You don't ask what kind. A young girl nearby offers you a bar of soap. It's soft, wrapped in wax paper. Smells like sage and something slightly floral. Made by my grandmother, she says. She says dirt is the devil's coat. You believe her. Later, you pass through the Guild District, where fine cloths are displayed behind glassless windows. Everything is bright, clean, folded with religious care. You look down at your still damp tunic and sigh. A tailor's apprentice whispers, "Next time, wear linen. Wool loves filth." You nod, filing that away for the next century. By dusk, you've nearly dried out, but your feet are sore. Your socks, if you can call them that, are permanently changed, and your tunic has adopted a new odor, a delicate blend of lavender, pond water, and stubbornness. You sit beside the Arno and stare at your reflection. You look alive, unwashed, slightly stained, but alive. Florence doesn't require you to be clean. It requires you to endure the dirt, to perfume over it, to whisper prayers through it, to survive inside it, and, if you're lucky, to do it without leeches. What time is it where you are right now? Is the world already quiet around you? You wake to footsteps, not soft ones. Boots, running, shouting. You press yourself against the wall as a group of city guards thunder past, torches swinging and swords clanging at their hips. One of them is yelling something about curfew, and another is already banging on a nearby door. Someone slams a shutter above you. Welcome to nighttime in Florence, where the rules change and the city becomes a different creature entirely. Less fresco and poetry, more daggers and fear. You pull your cloak tighter and slip down a side alley, heart thumping. The sun's barely gone, but Florence after dark is not for the faint of heart, or the slow of foot. Curfew isn't just a suggestion, it's enforced. The ordinances of justice, Florence's ever-growing collection of laws, say that anyone caught out after bell tolls without cause or escort can be detained, questioned, fined, or worse. You duck under an archway and try to remember how many bells tolled. 4? 5? Too many. You're already pushing your luck. You pass a man leading a donkey burdened with crates. He moves fast, head down, mumbling about wine deliveries. A guard stops him, asks questions, checks a seal stamped into the side of the barrel. Not wine. Scrolls. The guard pauses, grins, and lets him pass. Historians still argue whether Florence's curfew was about safety or control. Maybe both. The Medici liked knowing where everyone was, especially at night. You find yourself near the city wall, where guards with halberds lounge in smoke pipes filled with something that smells like boiled hay. One of them eyes you, then mutters, "Another fool wandering around like the moon owes him favors." You move faster. In a nearby square, you spot shadows. Too many, too close together. A group of young men in dark hoods laughing too loudly, moving like a pack of dogs testing the edge of a fence. They follow a merchant for a few paces, then scatter. One bumps into you. You feel his hand at your belt. You twist, step back. He laughs. "Sorry, traveler. Didn't know you were awake." He vanishes down the alley. Your pulse doesn't return to normal for minutes. You pass by a shrine candle, flickering beneath a crude carving of Saint Michael. The wax has melted over old flowers and bones of birds long dead. Someone scrawled a prayer there. "Protect me when the bells stop." You murmur it under your breath. You're not sure why. Florence doesn't close at night. It just gets meaner. The butchers are done. The bankers have retreated to their stone mansions. But the thieves, the spies, the desperate, they own the darkness. You turn a corner and find a brothel, unmistakable by the lantern swinging above the door and the laughter spilling from its open windows. Inside, women in silks lounge on benches, while a man plays a lute just badly enough to sound authentic. You linger in the doorway. A voice behind you says, "Looking, not buying?" You spin. A man with gold teeth and one good eye grins. "Don't worry, I won't tell." He disappears into the brothel. You keep walking. Across the street, a chapel glows with candlelight. Inside, two monks chant softly, cleansing the air with psalms. A woman kneels near the altar, weeping. Her sobs echo off stone. You kneel too, for the quiet. But the quiet doesn't last. From somewhere outside, a scream. Not long, just one, but it echoes. The monks pause. They don't flinch. The woman doesn't stop weeping. No one leaves. It's not that they don't care. It's that this is Florence. And some screams are just part of the night. You step back into the street. The city's colder now. Even the stones seem to pull away from your feet. You find a tavern still open, mostly filled with off-duty guards and men with hands too clean for the work they claim to do. You sit in the corner and order something warm. The innkeeper eyes you, pours wine into a chipped cup. It tastes like burned figs and desperation. Someone tosses dice in the back. Another man sleeps with his face pressed to a plate. Two women argue about a missing ring. No one makes eye contact. You leave before someone asks your name. Back on the street, the lamps are fewer. You hug walls, avoid open squares. You hear a dog bark, a child cry, a song sung off-key by someone who clearly can't stand silence. You pause at a well, its bucket half lowered. You draw it up, splash water on your face, breathe in the cold. It helps. And then you hear something soft. Footsteps. Behind you. You spin. Nothing. Just Florence watching you again. You decide it's time to stop pretending you have anywhere to go tonight. You find a low stoop beneath a worn arch, curl up, and wrap your cloak tight. As you close your eyes, you think, Florence is beautiful. By day. But at night, it belongs to those who know the shadows by name, and you don't. Yet. The Renaissance feels far away, but sometimes, doesn't it seem like we're not so different from them? You wake up to shouting. Again. But this time, it's not fear or fury. It's something else entirely. Commerce. You're in the market district, and Florence is already vibrating with energy. The sun barely crests the rooftops, but the stalls are out, the scales are swinging, and the smell, well, it's doing its best. It smells like figs, fish, sweat, and ambition. You stand, stretch, and immediately sidestep a goat nibbling on your shoe. A girl tugs it away and mutters, "He likes salt." You glance at your foot. You mutter something back. Welcome to the Florentine marketplace, where everything's for sale, including things that shouldn't be. You weave between stalls stacked with dates, lentils, hunks of cheese the size of babies, baskets of leeks, and at least 2 barrels of something bubbling that's probably olives, or possibly soup for the criminally undercooked. A merchant slams his fist on a crate. 3 florins for this? This question mark, it's bruised. The seller shrugs. So are you. Florence doesn't do polite haggling. It does public theater, performed in full voice and punctuated with wild hand gestures. You stop at a spice vendor's stall. Cinnamon, saffron, cloves. The scents are overwhelming. Rich, warm, and definitely not native to Tuscany. You ask about the saffron. From the east, the vendor says. Costs more than your teeth. You nod and walk away. Behind a curtain, you spot a woman selling medicinal herbs and charms. She offers you a sprig of rosemary tied with red thread. Keeps your food fresh and the devil confused, she promises. You don't have money, so you offer a verse of a psalm you half remember from last night's vespers. She grins. Close enough. You pocket the charm. Then you notice the stall next door. Relics. Again. Florence loves relics the way modern cities love coffee shops. This one claims to have 2 fingers of St. Bartholomew. You squint. They're clearly chicken bones. A man next to you leans in and whispers. The other vendor across the square says he has Bartholomew's elbow. They're feuding. You don't ask how one saint had so many arms. Down the row, you pass artisans hawking handmade tools. Chisels, weaving combs, embroidery needles. One blacksmith is forging horseshoes in the open air. The hammer strikes loud and musical. He glances at your shoes. Those soles won't last the week. You know he's right. You pass a fruit stall where apples gleam like they were polished by angels. The price is obscene. A small boy walks up, distracts the vendor with a joke, and swipes a pear. You catch his eye. He winks. You keep walking. Next is the fishmonger. He yells over everyone. "Fresh from the Arno," he cries. You look at the fish. It looks back. You decide today is not a fish day. You stop at a stand selling paint pigments, run by a stooped old man who grinds minerals into dust with endless patience. He shows you ultramarine, crushed from lapis lazuli. "Worth more than gold," he says. You ask if you can touch it. He pauses, then nods. You dip your finger in. It feels dry, cool, strangely holy. You thank him. He says, "Florence has more color than it knows what to do with." Not far off, a heated exchange draws your attention. 2 women are arguing over a piece of lace. One claims it's Venetian. The other says it's counterfeit. "My cousin is a lace merchant," one screams. "I'm sure she is," the other replies, smiling like a wolf. A crowd gathers, not to help, just to watch. Marketplace entertainment. A man in the back begins juggling oranges. Another sings a song about a baker's daughter and a goose. Someone tips over a cart. Lentils scatter like marbles. You step on one and nearly fall into a crate of dried beans. "Careful!" the vendor snaps. "That's next week's stew." You apologize and limp away. Near the market's edge, you find the textile merchants. Richly dyed bolts of cloth, emerald, crimson, gold. A woman fingers a piece of silk and gasps. It's softer than confession. The merchant bows. And more expensive. Florence is a city that weaves money and beauty into every corner. But it's not all glitter. You pass a beggar, sitting on the edge of the stalls. He's old, hunched, holding out a tin cup. People mostly ignore him. One boy tosses in a chestnut. The man nods, like it's a gem. You kneel beside him and hand him your last coin, a tiny bent copper you were saving for emergency bread. He smiles. God sees more than merchants. You believe him. Back in the center square, a man sets up a makeshift stage. He pulls out masks, comedy, tragedy, mischief, and begins a quick morality play about gluttony. The villain is dressed as a fishmonger. The crowd howls. Even the real fishmonger laughs. Sort of. You sit and watch until the end, when the actor playing Greed gets pelted with old turnips. A little girl hands you one. You decide not to eat it. As the sun climbs, the market gets louder, hotter, more chaotic. Someone spills vinegar. Someone else faints in the heat. A pickpocket gets chased across the square by a vendor wielding a ladle. You slip out before you become the next spectacle. Florence may worship art and whisper prayers to saints, but at its core, it's commerce. Loud, sweaty, haggling, pulsing with life. You sit by the river and unwrap your rosemary charm. It smells like breath, basil, and maybe a little luck. You wake to scratching. Not your own this time, which is both a surprise and a small victory. but the rhythmic shuffle of rat claws on stone. You open your eyes, just in time to see a plump gray rodent scurry past your face, dragging what looks like a string of fig stems. It doesn't even look at you. You groan and sit up, rubbing your arms. Something's not right. You're shivering, even though the sun's already up. And your throat? It feels like you swallowed a sack of hay. Florence may be a city of beauty, but it's also a city where getting sick is less an if and more a when. You've breathed too much dust, walked through too many alleys that doubled as latrines, and eaten one too many mystery figs. You try to stand. Your knees disagree. A woman passes with a basket of bread and frowns at you. You look pale. You try to smile. It probably looks more like a wince. She hands you a chunk of crust. You're not the first this week. As you chew, slowly, you start noticing things. A man coughing behind a fruit stall. A child rubbing their eyes raw. A washerwoman in the square, dumping a bucket of herbs into the fountain and muttering a prayer. Florence is always a little sick, but now it feels closer. You make your way toward the apothecary's district, wobbling like an undercooked pastry. The herbal shops are busier than ever. People line up, holding bundles of dried lavender, rosemary, mint, anything thought to ward off illness. You pass a cart filled with garlic, the supposed cure-all. One man's chewing it raw. His breath hits you like a confession. You keep walking. Historians still argue whether the medical practices of the Renaissance helped or hindered disease. On one hand, progress. On the other, they still use leeches and burnt toads. At the edge of a square, a friar stands on a crate, yelling over the noise. The Lord punishes pride with plague. Purge your vanity. Purge your sins. People watch him, but no one argues. Not this time. You finally reach a stall where an herb doctor is grinding something with mortar and pestle. She eyes you carefully. Headache? You nod. Fever? You nod again. She sniffs. You smell fine. Not dying yet. She offers you a sachet of dried sage tied with a black ribbon. Put this near your pillow. Keep the windows open. Don't eat anything you can't identify. You already broke that last rule. Twice. You buy the sachet with a small wooden button. She accepts it without complaint. If the fever worsens, she says, boil cabbage. Sit in the steam. Then drink the broth. 3 days. Then pray. Got it. As you leave, you notice a man nearby selling miracle cures from a cart. He waves a bottle in the air, shouting, "Blessed wine, holy honey," stops coughs, cures boils, raises spirits and crops. Someone asks what's in it. He shrugs. Mostly vinegar and luck. You buy nothing. Later, you stop by a public fountain. A boy is filling jugs. His mother watches you, frowning. "Don't drink from that one," she says. "Someone sick washed their hands." You thank her. Move on. You pass a bakery. Even that smell doesn't bring joy today. And worse, your limbs ache in places that didn't exist yesterday. You find a bench and sit, cradling your head. A dog wanders over and sniffs your feet. Decides you're boring. Moves on. A group of monks walks by, carrying candles and chanting softly. One carries a bucket of herbs. Another swings a censer. They're heading toward a quarantined home, marked with a red X above the door. You whisper a prayer without knowing who for. Florence takes illness seriously, but quietly. No one panics. They just adjust. Windows stay closed. Meals are boiled longer. Relatives visit less. Life contracts inward like a drawn breath. And yet, the city keeps moving. Children still play in alleys. Merchants still shout prices. Artists still mix paint with egg yolks that definitely should have been thrown out yesterday. You hobble toward the church, hoping for peace. The priest sees you, offers you a seat. You tell him you're not sure what you need. He says, rest, a quiet corner, and sage tea. The pew is hard, but it's cool. And the silence, for once, feels like comfort instead of judgment. You sit, you breathe, you close your eyes. Outside, Florence continues its strange dance, half holy, half contagious. Inside, you clutch your little sachet and hope cabbage steam doesn't smell as bad as it sounds. Because if it does, you're going to be miserable and boiled. If today was tough, don't worry. We'll go slower tonight. You can just breathe and listen. You wake to drums. Not gentle morning bells, not market chatter. Drums. Heavy, deliberate, echoing across the stone walls like thunder wrapped in leather. You sit upright instantly, because this isn't music. This is a signal. Florence is preparing for a public execution. You stand, dizzy from fever and fear, and maybe still a little cabbage steam. But you move, because whether you want to see it or not, the whole city will be there. These events are part punishment, part theater, and part civic bonding ritual. Nothing draws a crowd like justice with a side of almonds. You follow the flow of the crowd through winding alleys toward the Piazza della Signoria, Florence's public living room / moral tribunal. And already, it's packed. Families arrive early. Vendors set up carts. There's music playing, lutes and drums, like a festival. Except this festival ends with someone losing their head, or hanging, or something involving fire. You don't ask. You squeeze between a baker's assistant and a nun holding roasted chestnuts. You ask her why she's here. She shrugs. The same reason you are. Ahead, a scaffold has been built. Tall, rough, splattered with reminders that this isn't the first time it's been used. A noose hangs from a thick wooden beam, swaying gently. A man in black stands beside it, arms folded, face unreadable. The executioner. Florence pays him well, and discreetly. You glance around. Children are eating pastries. A group of friars murmurs prayers in the shade. A merchant uses the waiting time to seal a deal on silk bolts. One woman, clearly annoyed, mutters, "We should have brought chairs." Historians still debate whether these events were meant to deter crime, or simply remind everyone who holds the power to end you in front of your neighbors. The guards arrive first. Then the city officials. Robes, ribbons, bored expressions. The sentence is read aloud. You catch only parts. Crime of sedition, insult to the Holy Church, spreading of untruths. And then, the condemned. A man, barefoot, bruised, but upright, proud, or stubborn, or simply tired. He says nothing. Someone in the crowd spits. Someone else throws a flower. The priest approaches him, offering final rites. He accepts. The square falls silent for the first time that day. You hold your breath. The noose tightens. The trap opens. It happens quickly. No applause. No wailing. Just a long pause. Then, normal resumes. A vendor shouts, "Hot almonds," as if nothing happened. A child drops a toy. Two noble women argue over whether the accused had noble blood. "I heard he insulted the Medici in a tavern," one whispers. "He was drunk, or brave, maybe both." You drift away from the square, feet moving without thought. You end up in a shaded alley beside a small shrine. St. Bartholomew again. His face painted with calm, his hand raised in gentle warning. A woman kneels before him, muttering a prayer between bites of honey bread. You sit beside her. She offers you a piece. You eat in silence. You learn that executions here are more than punishment. They're reminders that your words matter, that the city listens, that your actions echo louder than you might think. Later, as you walk past the Loggia dei Lanzi, you see tourists, well, their 15th century equivalent, admiring sculptures of men in eternal struggle. Hercules lifting a club, Perseus holding Medusa's head, art imitating justice. Or maybe it's the other way around. You sit on a bench as a dog licks spilled wine from the cobblestones. Two men nearby argue over the condemned man's guilt. He was reckless, one says. He was right, says the other. Both nod. A girl draws in chalk near your feet. She sketches a gallows, then draws flowers around it. You don't know how to feel about that. By nightfall, Florence hums again. Taverns fill. Dinner is served. A new poem circulates about the morning's event. Half rumor, half verse. The man's name is already being forgotten. But you remember, and so does the rope. You wake to singing, software gentle, surprisingly on key. It's coming from a nearby window, where a young man in a brown doublet stands below a second-story balcony, strumming a lute and gazing upward with the kind of earnest intensity usually reserved for saints and soup recipes. Your eyes, he croons, are like two polished olives. You cringe slightly. The metaphor is adventurous. But the young woman, leaning on the balcony above, she sighs dreamily. She's heard worse. Welcome to Renaissance romance, where love is a game of poetry, patience, and persistent loitering. You stretch and sit up against the sun-warmed wall. Your back cracks in 3 places. You are, technically, on a date with Florence. And today, you're going to learn how people flirt when bathing is suspicious and marriage is often a business deal. The serenade continues. A neighbor dumps a chamber pot mid-stanza. The singer doesn't flinch. Love in Florence? It's resilient. You wander toward a shaded alley where a cluster of young women walk together in tight formation, laughing behind fans. Their hair is intricately braided, and their gowns are stitched within an inch of their lives. When a boy passes, they lower their eyes, but not enough to miss anything. One of them whispers, "That's Niccolo." He quoted Dante to 3 girls last week. Her friend sighs. I'd marry him if he ever finishes a sentence. Historians still argue whether courtship in Florence was more about affection or alliance. The answer? Probably both, with a side of metaphor. You trail behind a merchant's daughter as she drops her handkerchief. Casually, deliberately, possibly for the 5th time. A passing apprentice bends, retrieves it, hands it back. Their fingers touch. They smile. She walks away. He stares at the spot where she vanished like it's consecrated ground. And then, of course, there's poetry. You sit near the fountain as a boy recites a verse to no one in particular. My love is a lantern in your night of sighs. Please answer my letters, or at least don't lie. It's not great, but 3 listeners swoon anyway. You try to write your own poem. You come up with, thy smile is present. Thy breath is occasional. Thy presence, like Florence, somewhat overwhelming. You crumble the parchment. Later, you follow a procession through the streets. Not a religious one this time, but a wedding. The bride is covered in white lace. The groom wears velvet and nerves. Drummers lead the way, followed by singers, dancers, and a man juggling lemons for reasons no one explains. You ask a woman nearby about the couple. They met twice, she says. It's a good match. He owns vineyards. She owns her mother's eyebrows. You nod. That seems enough. Most marriages in Florence are arranged between families. Love, if it comes, is a bonus. Negotiations can take months, dowries calculated like battle plans. But passion? That burns in the alleys, in letters, in glances stolen through lattice shutters. You see two boys throwing pebbles at a window. One hits the target. A girl appears, scowls, and throws a walnut back. Direct hit. The boys cheer. You have no idea what just happened, but it counts as progress. In the piazza, a masked ball is being planned. Masks offer privacy, possibility. A woman can flirt without obligation. A man can be bold without consequence. It's the Renaissance version of anonymous texting, with more lace. You find a tailor hemming a green silk mask. "This shade hides jealousy," he says with a wink, "unless your rival wears red." As dusk falls, you overhear a scandalous story whispered between two baker's apprentices. She met him in the confessional. He quoted Petrarch. She quoted price per bushel. He's a goner. By torchlight, lovers walk the garden paths behind chapels. If they're lucky, they can speak without chaperones, just long enough to trade riddles, coins, or promises they may or may not intend to keep. A boy passes you, carrying a rose made from paper. He drops it at a doorstep, knocks once, and vanishes. You linger and watch. A girl opens the door, picks up the rose, smiles, and closes it without a word. Florence doesn't wear its heart on its sleeve. It hides it in folded notes, shared bread, veiled glances, and music played just out of tune. Love here isn't loud. It's whispered, risked, stolen between rules and rituals. You find yourself back where you started, beneath the balcony. The lute boy has finished his song. The girl above him claps politely. He bows. She drops a fig into his hands. It's not a kiss, but it'll do. Would you rather hear more about the painters or the ironworkers of the Renaissance? Let me know down below. You wake to smoke? Not fire. Not yet. But the thick, oily kind that smells like someone's burning perfume and paintings, and possibly a few things they shouldn't. You sit up, blinking against the morning haze, and realize Florence has changed overnight. The colors are still here, the frescoes, the silk, the sunlight bouncing off gold leaf. But there's something darker rising through it now, something tight and angry and righteous. You follow the sound of shouting down the winding streets, past shuttered stalls and newly blank walls. Posters have been torn down, statues covered, paintings removed. At the edge of the piazza, a pile of belongings burns. Mirrors, books, musical instruments, dresses, wigs, tapestries. Things that once whispered pleasure, things that now scream vanity. Welcome to the bonfire of the vanities. At the center of it all stands Girolamo Savonarola, Dominican friar, preacher, prophet, and Florence's increasingly terrifying conscience. He speaks in fire, and Florence is listening. You spot him on a raised platform, robes flaring in the wind, voice booming as he denounces sin, wealth, corruption, and every Renaissance indulgence the city has spent the last century perfecting. "Vanity," he cries, pointing at a silk-draped noblewoman. "Vanity," again, at a musician clutching his lute like a lifeline. "Repent," the crowd murmurs. Some cheer, some look away. Others throw their cosmetics, jewelry, and poetry onto the flames, hoping it's enough to make the fear stop breathing down their necks. You step back as the heat kisses your face. Historians still argue whether Savonarola was a holy man or a manipulator with a gift for fear. What's clear is that he didn't rise alone. He rose on Florence's guilt, its wealth, its art, its beauty, and told it to burn. You walk the square, watching as old masters tear down their own canvases. One man throws in a lute, then sobs for 5 straight minutes. A boy tries to burn a mirror, but stops to check his hair one last time. A group of friars patrols the crowd like moral tax collectors, searching for signs of pride. They knock on doors, ask questions. Do you have foreign fabric? Have you read Ovid? Have you laughed too much this week? Someone answers wrong. The door closes behind them. You keep walking. You pass a sculptor hammering a smiling cherub off a fountain. Too joyful, he mutters. An artist scrapes gold leaf off a virgin's halo. Too bright. Even the churches are dimmer now. You pause outside the Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore, where they've removed the silk banners, the polished reliquaries, the painted cherubs. The air inside feels colder, not holier, just emptier. You kneel, not to pray, to rest. A friar taps your shoulder. That cloak, what dye is it? You look down. It's brown, plain, but not plain enough apparently. You nod, remove it. He walks away with it in a bundle. You exhale. Florence has always loved extremes. Opulence, brilliance, danger. Now it loves purity, not the quiet kind. The kind that sharpens its teeth. You wander toward the river and find a group of boys throwing dice in secret. They laugh too loudly. One makes the sign of the cross and whispers, "Forgive me, Savonarola." They're 10. The bonfire still smolders in the distance. You watch the smoke curl toward the sky, carrying with it pigments, songs, sonnets, and silk slippers. You wonder, is this what change smells like? That night, the bells ring longer than usual. Florence has passed through fire before. Plague, war, banking collapse. But this feels different. This feels like self-immolation. You huddle beside a fountain, chilled despite the warm air. A woman walks by with her daughter, whispering bedtime prayers. She skips the part about joy. You fall asleep to the sound of someone hammering a painting frame into firewood. Florence used to burn with passion. Now, it burns with judgment. And tomorrow, it may burn you too. You wake to bells again, but this time, they ring not for prayer, or vespers, or executions. They ring for rebellion. It's early, but the streets are already thick with tension. The smoke from yesterday's fires hasn't cleared. It lingers in alleyways and under arches, curling around the city's stones like it belongs there. But now, it's joined by something sharper, the scent of anger. You stand slowly, heart thudding. Crowds are gathering in the Piazza della Signoria, but they aren't quiet this time. There are no prayers, no friars marching with crosses held high. Today, it's voices, raised, raw, and very, very loud. You follow the noise. At the center of the square, beneath the looming shadows of the Palazzo Vecchio, a group of men, traders, clerks, even a few artisans, stand on crates and shout to the crowd. He's taken our sons. He's burned our history. He claims he's saving our souls, but he's stolen our city. They mean Savonarola, and you realize it's all breaking now. For weeks, Florence has been shrinking inward. Paintings vanishing, music silenced, lovers separated, artists censored, but something always survives in the cracks. And this morning, those cracks are splitting wide open. Guards march into the square, trying to form a line. But people push back. Someone throws a stone. Another throws a loaf of bread. Honestly, it's hard to tell which lands with more force. Historians still argue whether the revolt against Savonarola was spontaneous or carefully orchestrated by the Medici loyalists waiting for their moment. What's clear is that this moment, right now, isn't controlled by anyone. The square is a mess of yelling, smoke, and fear. You duck into an alley and find two women pulling down a banner embroidered with Savonarola's emblem. One spits on it. "He made me burn my wedding veil," she mutters. You nod. What else is there to say? By midday, the city is unraveling. The friars have retreated. The churches are shuttered. Somewhere, someone is ringing a bell, not for mass, but as a signal. You pass a scribe writing leaflets by hand. He looks up and says, "The Republic must survive, with or without saints." The flyer he hands you says, "Libertà per Firenze." You tuck it into your tunic. Down by the Arno, the water flows thick and brown. But even here, the whispers travel. He's been arrested. The Signoria turned on him. They found letters, evidence, secrets. A boy asks, "Will we have music again?" No one answers. You return to the piazza in time to see the crowd part. Guards lead Savonarola himself through the square. Chained, barefoot, robes torn. He does not shout. He does not curse. He just walks. Some cheer. Others boo. One woman throws a rosary at his feet and sobs. The man who burned Florence's vanities is now the city's offering. The scaffold is already being built. You stay until nightfall, not out of cruelty, out of awe. Florence shifts again, not back to what it was, but somewhere new, somewhere cracked, scarred, and somehow still burning. You walk home. If a doorstep under a church arch counts as home. A musician plays quietly in a distant alley. A lullaby. You pause. Listen. The song is old, software defiant. Florence is wounded, but still singing. And you? You've survived. You've survived the stench, the politics, the poetry, the pigeons, the plague, the judgment, and now this. You've learned how to walk its streets, how to dress without declaring a tax bracket, how to whisper safely, how to sleep light, how to pretend not to hear footsteps behind you. You know the city now, not just its paintings, but its heartbeat. You lie down one last time, on stone that's still warm from the day. The bells have stopped. The air smells of wax and ash. Somewhere, someone is sketching again. Florence is wounded, but Florence will rise. And you are finally part of it. The square grows quiet. The streets, once crowded with shouting and sermon and song, begin to breathe again. Slowly, gently. You lie still beneath the archway, listening not for the bells, but for the absence of them. The night presses in, but it's soft now, like linen, like dusk after heat, like silence after story. Florence no longer demands anything of you. No more dodging chamber pots. No more haggling for garlic. No more watching over your shoulder for friars, or flirtation, or flying figs. Just stillness. You hear a pigeon flap softly overhead. A woman's voice, somewhere distant, low and humming. Water trickling from a neglected fountain. The scrape of a broom on stone. Life, quiet, gentle, human, resumes its soft rhythm. The wind moves through the arches like breath through lungs. The city sleeps. And you, after everything, after this long, strange, beautiful day, or week, or dream, can finally sleep too. You don't need to know what happens tomorrow. You don't need to outrun the rats, or the friars, or the next political turn. You don't even need to understand the city. Just rest in it. You've seen the art, but also the dust. You've heard the poetry, but also the groans. You've lived for just a little while in the soul of Florence. Now close your eyes. Breathe in the faint trace of rosemary and ash. Let the stone cradle you, and let the night, for once, ask nothing in return. You're safe here, and you're home. Even a small like from you. It's like a little candle in the dark. It helps me keep telling these stories.